A group of Tojolabal believers gathered in the village of Libertad, meaning liberty, about 5 miles north of Las Margaritas. From the beginning there was opposition. We worshipped with them only once, sneaking in at night to one of their homes on the backside of the village. There was no liberty in Libertad. The persecution increased, including beatings and imprisonment and death threats, until they finally agreed to leave the village. With financial help from the presbytery, they purchased land about 25 miles southeast of Las Margaritas. Pastor Jose Juan Suarez and his elders made a pastoral visit and found the men busily clearing land to plant corn and beans. They pointed out the boundaries of their land, and then they led us to where they were constructing their homes. They had already cleared several acres of brush and trees. It did not look very promising to me. They had been permitted to dismantle their houses in Libertad and were using the materials to rebuild in this location, which they called Samaria. Some of their houses were quite complete. Others were half done, and some were sleeping on the ground in temporary shelters. They had dug out a wet spot as a source of water, but it did not look very healthy. They all gathered in the shade of a tree for a brief service. Pastor Jose Juan read some scripture and encouraged them, and then he led them in prayer. Then they gathered for this photo. When we returned a few months later, it was rainy season and the cornfields were bright green. The fields of beans also looked very promising. They had moved their families to the new location, which included a lot of children. And they had planned a main street through the center of the village. This family had torn down the cement block home in Libertad and transported the blocks to the new location. In the middle of the village, they were building a chapel and are gathering now for the Sunday worship. They warmly welcomed Francisco Gomez, his brother, and Helen. One of the young women led the singing, accompanied by 2 of the men on guitars. Another young woman read the scripture. Francisco Gomez preached the sermon. Following the service, there was an enjoyable time of visiting, and then they fed us a chicken dinner. Additional families in Libertad became evangelicals, and they too were chased out of the village. We transported them to Samaria. By this time, Samaria began to look like a well-established village. They had even fenced in the main street and filled the mud holes with crushed stone. Their musical group had increased in number. They had not enclosed the walls of the chapel because they no longer fit inside. When Brian and Donna Renes arrived in Las Margaritas to begin service in the Tojolabal tribe, we drove them and Francisco Gomez to Samaria. It had rained, so we were not able to drive all the way to the village. The believers met us at the main gate, and they accompanied us to their new church building. The state government had responded to their request for electricity and had also built them a town hall. On Sundays, they used the town hall as a sanctuary for their worship service, and they were already filling it with people and with music. Quite a transformation in about 5 years of hard work, a clear indication of the blessings of the Lord on his people.